Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive structure floating in the void ahead of them. The Frontier Dawn had been exploring the outer edges of known space for 3 months now, and this was the strangest thing they had found yet. The structure looked ancient, made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb the light from nearby stars. It was huge, maybe 10 times the size of their ship, and covered in symbols that no human had ever seen before. "Lisa, are you getting anything on the scanners?" Jake asked his chief linguist, Dr. Lisa Chen, who was hunched over her console studying the readings. "The energy signatures are off the charts," Lisa said without looking up. "This thing is definitely artificial, but the technology is unlike anything in our databases. The symbols on the surface match some of the oldest religious texts from the Galactic Council archives." Commander Alex Rivera moved closer to the main viewing screen. "Could this be connected to the Silent Ones?" he asked quietly. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Silent Ones. They were the gods that every species worshipped. For thousands of years they had watched over the galaxy, but they never spoke directly to anyone. They only left mysterious symbols and signs for their followers to interpret. Professor Sam Williams looked up from his research station. "The architectural style does match some of the temple designs from the core worlds," he said. "But this structure is much older than any of those temples. This could be one of the original divine artifacts." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Finding anything connected to the Silent Ones was dangerous. The Galactic Faithful Council had strict rules about approaching divine artifacts without proper religious preparation. But they were human explorers, not faithful followers of any alien religion. Their job was to explore and learn, not to bow down to mysterious gods. "Take us closer," Jake ordered, "but keep our distance. I want to scan every inch of this thing before we make any moves." The Frontier Dawn moved slowly toward the ancient structure. As they got closer, the symbols on its surface became clearer. They were carved deep into the metal and filled with some kind of glowing material that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lisa was frantically taking readings and comparing them to her database of known languages. "Captain, I think I can make out some patterns in these symbols," Lisa said excitedly. "They're not random decorations. This looks like some kind of communication array or maybe a control interface." "Communication array?" Alex asked. "You mean this thing might still be active?" "That's exactly what I mean," Lisa replied. "The energy readings suggest that whatever powers this structure is still running. It's been waiting out here for who knows how long." Jake made his decision. "Prepare a shuttle. Lisa, you're with me. We're going to take a closer look." "Sir, the Galactic Council protocols clearly state that any divine artifacts should only be approached by certified religious officials," Alex said with concern in his voice. "The Galactic Council isn't here," Jake replied. "And we're humans, not members of their religious hierarchy. Our job is to explore and report what we find. We can't do that from a distance." 20 minutes later, Jake and Lisa were floating in spacesuits toward the ancient structure. Up close, it was even more impressive. The metal surface was perfectly smooth except for the carved symbols. There were no visible doors or openings anywhere. "How do we get inside?" Jake asked over the radio. Lisa was studying one of the larger symbol panels with her portable scanner. "These symbols are definitely some kind of interface," she said. "I think if I press them in the right sequence, something might happen." "Are you sure that's safe?" "Nothing about this is safe," Lisa replied. "But we didn't come all this way to just look at the outside." Lisa placed her gloved hand on the first symbol. It glowed brighter as soon as she touched it. She pressed the next symbol in the sequence she had worked out, then the next. Suddenly, the entire panel lit up with brilliant white light and a section of the wall began to slide open. "Well, that worked better than expected," Jake said as they floated through the opening into the structure. Inside was even more amazing than outside. The walls were covered with more symbols that glowed with soft blue light. The air was breathable according to their suit sensors. Advanced technology hummed quietly all around them, but it looked nothing like human or any other known alien technology. "This place is incredible," Lisa whispered as she recorded everything with her scanners. "The technology here is so advanced, I can't even begin to understand how it works." They moved deeper into the structure, following corridors that seemed to go on forever. Finally, they reached what looked like a central chamber. In the middle was a huge curved wall covered with symbols that were much larger and brighter than any they had seen before. "This looks like the main control system," Lisa said as she approached the wall of symbols. "If this really is a communication array, then this would be where messages are sent and received." "Communication with who?" Jake asked. "With the silent ones themselves," Lisa replied in an awed voice. She began studying the symbols more carefully with her equipment. "Captain, I think these aren't just decorative. I think they're actually a working interface. If I'm right, then this structure has been waiting for someone to activate it." "Activate it how?" Lisa pointed to a section of symbols that seemed different from the others. "These symbols here seem to be some kind of power control. And these over here look like communication protocols. If I press them in the right order, I might be able to turn this whole system on." Jake hesitated. Activating ancient alien technology was dangerous enough. Activating technology that might belong to the gods themselves was almost certainly a very bad idea. But they had come too far to turn back now. "Do it," he said. Lisa pressed the first symbol. The entire chamber filled with a low humming sound. She pressed the second symbol and the walls began to glow brighter. She pressed the third symbol and suddenly the air in the chamber began to shimmer like heat waves. Then something impossible happened. A voice spoke in perfect English directly into their minds. "Who dares disturb our meditation?" Jake and Lisa stood frozen in shock. The Silent Ones had never spoken to anyone in recorded galactic history. They communicated only through symbols and signs that religious leaders interpreted for their followers. But this voice was clear and direct and definitely not human. For a moment, Jake couldn't think of what to say. This was the most important moment in galactic history, and he was completely unprepared for it. Then his explorer instincts kicked in, and he did what humans always did when meeting someone new. "Hello," he said simply. "We're explorers from Earth. We'd like to talk." The silence that followed Jake's simple greeting seemed to last forever. Lisa stood beside him with her scanner still recording everything. The voice that had spoken to them was unlike anything either of them had ever heard. It sounded ancient and tired, but also surprised. "Earth," the voice said finally. "We do not know this world. You speak with such casualness to beings you do not understand." "We speak to everyone the same way," Jake replied. "It's just how humans are. We like to talk and learn about new things." "Humans," the voice repeated the word slowly. "You are not among the faithful races. You do not worship as the others do." Lisa stepped forward with her scientific curiosity, overcoming her shock. "Are you one of the Silent Ones?" she asked directly. Another long pause. "We are what your galaxy calls by that name, yes, though we have not been truly silent, only selective in our communications." "Why don't you talk to the other species?" Jake asked. "They've been worshipping you for thousands of years and you never say a word to them." "Because words have power," the voice replied, "and power corrupts both those who wield it and those who receive it. Silence maintains the proper order." Lisa was frantically taking notes on her scanner. "But you're talking to us now. What makes us different? You approached our sacred technology without fear or reverence. You activated systems that others would never dare to touch. You speak to us as equals rather than as subjects seeking divine guidance. This is unexpected." Back on the Frontier Dawn, Commander Alex Rivera was monitoring the away team's communications with growing concern. Professor Sam Williams was at his side trying to understand what they were witnessing. "They're actually talking to one of the Silent Ones," Sam whispered in amazement. "This is the most significant religious event in galactic history." "And they're treating it like a casual conversation," Alex replied. "The Galactic Council is going to lose their minds when they hear about this." As if summoned by his words, the ship's communication system activated with an incoming message from the nearest council station. The face of Elder Zixthera appeared on the screen. Her mantis-like features were rigid with barely controlled anger. "Human vessel," she clicked in the universal trade language. "Our sensors have detected unauthorized activation of divine technology in your sector. Explain your actions immediately." Alex straightened his uniform and tried to look official. "Elder, Sixth Era. We are conducting standard exploration operations in unclaimed space. We discovered an ancient structure and are investigating it according to human protocols. Human protocols! Zixthera's antennae twitched with outrage. Human protocols do not apply to sacred artifacts. You will cease all activities immediately and withdraw from the area until proper religious authorities can take control. With respect, Elder, this structure was found in space that no government claims. We have every right to investigate it. Rights, Zixthera hissed. You speak of rights when dealing with the divine realm. Your species' lack of proper reverence is well known, but this exceeds all acceptable limits. Meanwhile, inside the ancient structure, Jake and Lisa were learning things that would shake the foundation of galactic religion. The voice that called itself the First Voice was answering their questions with surprising honesty. How long have you been out here? Lisa asked. Time has little meaning for our kind, the First Voice replied. But by your measurements, this station has been operational for approximately 12,000 years. And in all that time, you never talked directly to anyone. Direct communication was deemed too dangerous. When gods speak, mortals tend to stop thinking for themselves. They become dependent on divine guidance for every decision. This leads to stagnation and weakness. Jake was beginning to understand something important. So you stay silent to force other species to figure things out on their own. That was the theory, yes. Though we have watched your species with interest, humans seem immune to the paralysis that divine revelation causes in others. You continue to question and explore regardless of what authority figures tell you. Lisa was studying the technology around them with her scanners. Your equipment here, it's advanced but not impossibly so. Human science could probably duplicate most of this within a few decades. An astute observation, the First Voice said, and Jake could hear something like amusement in its tone. Divine mystery often relies more on careful presentation than on actual superiority. Back on the ship, more messages were pouring in from across the galaxy. Word of the human contact with the Silent Ones was spreading through the quantum communication networks faster than Alex could track. Religious leaders from dozens of species were demanding explanations. Some were calling it blasphemy. Others were declaring it the beginning of a new age of divine revelation. High Priestess Velnara of the dominant faithful sect appeared on their communication screen next. Her blue-skinned features were twisted with righteous fury. The humans have committed the ultimate sacrilege, she declared. They have forced the Silent Ones to break their sacred silence. This violation of divine protocol cannot be tolerated. Admiral, Kate Thompson's voice came through on the secure military channel. Commander Rivera, I'm getting reports from all over human space. Half the galaxy is calling us heretics and the other half is calling us prophets. What exactly is happening out there? Ma'am, Captain Morrison and Dr. Chen have made contact with one of the Silent Ones. They're having what appears to be a normal conversation. A normal conversation with a god. That's correct, ma'am. And from what I can hear, the god seems to enjoy talking to them. Inside the structure, the conversation was taking an even more interesting turn. Lisa had been analyzing the technology around them, and her findings were startling. Your quantum communication systems are actually less sophisticated than what we use on human ships, she told the First Voice. And your power generation is efficient but follows principles we already understand. Does this disappoint you? The First Voice asked. Not disappoint, Jake replied. But it makes us curious. If your technology isn't that far ahead of ours, then what makes you gods? An excellent question, the First Voice said. What indeed makes us gods? Perhaps it is time someone asked that question directly. The implications of what they were learning began to sink in for both humans. If the Silent Ones weren't technologically superior to current galactic civilization, then their status as gods was based on something else entirely. Age, perhaps, or simply the fact that no one had ever questioned them before. Would you be willing to meet with us in person? Jake asked. I think there are things we need to discuss that go beyond this communication system. The pause was longer this time. When the First Voice spoke again, there was something different in its tone, something almost like relief. Yes, it said simply. Yes, I think the time has come for that meeting. I will come to your vessel. It has been far too long since one of us has ventured into the mortal realm. You'll actually leave your station and come to our ship, Lisa asked in amazement. The age of silent watching from afar is ending, the first voice replied. Your species has forced a change that we have been avoiding for millennia. It is time to face the consequences of that change. As Jake and Lisa prepared to return to their ship, they realized they had just triggered the most significant event in galactic history. The Silent Ones were going to break their ancient protocols and reveal themselves directly to mortals for the first time. And it was all because humans had treated gods like people they wanted to have a conversation with. The galaxy would never be the same. The shuttle bay of the Frontier Dawn had been hastily converted into a diplomatic meeting area. Jake Morrison stood with his senior officers watching the approaching vessel on their screens. The ship that carried the first voice was unlike anything they had ever seen. It seemed to be made of the same dark material as the ancient station, but it flowed and shifted like liquid metal as it moved through space. I've never seen anything move like that, Commander Alex Rivera said as he watched the alien vessel dock with their ship. It's like the whole thing is alive. Dr. Lisa Chen was monitoring every scanner they had. The energy readings are incredible, but they're not off our scale anymore. It's advanced technology, but it follows physical laws we understand. Professor Sam Williams was reviewing his notes frantically. In all the religious texts I've studied, there are descriptions of the Silent Ones appearing to mortals, but those were always interpreted as visions or dreams. No one ever recorded an actual physical meeting. The docking process was surprisingly smooth. Whatever technology the first voice used, it interfaced perfectly with human systems. Jake found himself wondering if this compatibility was coincidental, or if their visitor had adapted specifically for this meeting. Captain, came a voice over the ship's communication system. It was the same voice they had heard at the station, but now it sounded like it was coming from their own speakers. Permission to board your vessel. Permission granted, Jake replied. We're honored to meet you in person. The airlock opened and Jake got his first look at one of the beings that half the galaxy worshipped as gods. The first voice was tall and thin, maybe 7 feet in height, with pale gray skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the ship's lighting. Its face was vaguely humanoid but stretched and angular in a way that suggested great age. It wore simple robes that moved with the same liquid quality as its ship. What surprised Jake most was how ordinary the being seemed. Despite its alien appearance, there was nothing mystical or divine about its presence. It looked tired and maybe a little sad. I am Kyrian, the being said as it entered the shuttle bay. Though your galaxy knows me by other names, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. This is my crew. Would you like to sit down? We've prepared a conference room. Kyrian looked around the shuttle bay with what might have been curiosity. You treat me as you would treat any other visitor to your ship. This is refreshing but also somewhat disturbing. Why disturbing? Lisa asked as they walked toward the conference room. Because it confirms something I have suspected for a very long time. The reverence that other species show us is not based on any real understanding of what we are. They settled around the conference table with Kyrian sitting across from the human officers. Up close, Jake could see that what he had taken for robes were actually some kind of advanced life support system. Tubes and wires ran beneath the fabric connecting to devices that kept the ancient being alive. You're much older than you look, aren't you? Jake observed. Older than your species has existed, Kyrian replied. I am one of the last survivors of a race that achieved technological advancement millions of years ago. We learned how to extend our lives far beyond natural limits, but we could not prevent the death of our world or our people. Dr. Ben Parker, the ship's medical officer, leaned forward with professional interest. The life support systems you're wearing, they're what keep you alive. For the past several 100,000 years, yes, we are dying beings clinging to existence through artificial means. Lisa was taking notes on everything. So you're not actually gods at all. You're refugees from a dead civilization. We are what we have always been, Kyrian said. But the younger races in this galaxy chose to see us as gods when they first encountered our technology. At first we tried to correct this misunderstanding. What changed your minds? Alex asked. We discovered that being worshipped was easier than being questioned. When species treated us as gods, they stopped asking difficult questions about our origins or our capabilities. They accepted our guidance without demanding explanations. Jake was beginning to understand the full scope of what they had stumbled into. So you've been pretending to be gods for thousands of years because it made your lives simpler. Not pretending exactly, Kyrian replied carefully. We simply stopped correcting the assumptions others made about us. We allowed myths to grow around us because myths are easier to maintain than truth. Professor Williams looked up from his notes. The religious texts describe the silent ones as beings of pure energy who exist beyond physical form. But you're obviously very physical. Religious texts tend to describe what believers want to hear rather than what actually exists, Kyrian said with something that might have been humor. Pure energy beings make better gods than tired old aliens in life support suits. Lisa was studying her scanner readings. Your technology is impressive, but it's not magical. Everything you do follows scientific principles we can understand. Some of it we could probably build ourselves given enough time. Your species has always been quick to understand new concepts, Kyrian agreed. It is one of the reasons we were curious about you. Most species, when they encounter something beyond their immediate comprehension, decide it must be divine. Humans seem to assume everything can be figured out eventually. That's because everything can be figured out eventually, Jake said. It just takes time and effort. And there is the fundamental difference between your species and most others in the galaxy. They seek comfort in mystery. You seek to solve mysteries. Admiral Thompson's voice came through the secure communication channel. Captain Morrison, I'm getting reports from across human space. Religious leaders from multiple species are demanding that we turn our visitor over to them. They're calling this meeting a violation of divine protocol. Jake looked at Kyrian. Are we violating any protocols by talking to you directly? The protocols were established by us to maintain our privacy, Kyrian replied. If we choose to waive them, that is our decision to make. Then we'll keep talking, Jake decided. Admiral, please inform the religious authorities that our guest is here voluntarily and will leave when he chooses to. Captain Maria Gonzalez's voice joined the conversation from the diplomatic corps. Captain, I'm being contacted by every major government in the galaxy. Half of them want to declare war on us for committing blasphemy, and the other half want to make us their new religious leaders for gaining divine favor. Tell them we're not interested in being either war criminals or prophets, Jake replied. We're just explorers having a conversation. Kyrian had been listening to these exchanges with obvious interest. Your species handles crisis situations differently than others. Most would be paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. We make wrong choices all the time, Alex said. We just try to learn from them and do better next time. This attitude is precisely why I agreed to this meeting, Kyrian said. I have something to confess that I have never told any mortal before. The humans waited silently for him to continue. We are dying, Kyrian said simply. Not just individually, but as a species. Our life support technology is failing, and we do not have the knowledge to repair it. We have perhaps a few more centuries before the last of us finally expires. I'm sorry, Lisa said quietly. That must be a terrible burden to carry. It would be, except for one thing. We want to die. We have been ready to die for millennia, but we could not abandon our responsibilities to the younger races without causing chaos across the galaxy. Jake leaned forward. What kind of responsibilities? The responsibility of being gods, Kyrian replied. Every species in the galaxy structures their society around worshipping us. Their governments, their laws, their entire sense of meaning depends on our continued existence. If we simply disappeared or died, their civilizations would collapse. So you've been staying alive against your will to prevent galactic chaos. Exactly. But your species has given us an opportunity we never expected. You have proven that it is possible to interact with us without worship or dependence. You treat us as equals rather than as gods. Lisa was starting to see where this conversation was leading. You want our help to step down from being gods. We want your help to reveal the truth to the galaxy, Kyrian confirmed. We want to retire from godhood and die with dignity. But we need a species that can help guide the others through the transition away from divine dependence. And you think humans can do that? You have already started doing it simply by talking to us normally. Other species are beginning to question their assumptions about divine authority. Some are angry, but others are curious. Jake looked around, the table at his officers. They were all thinking the same thing. Humanity was being asked to help destroy the religious foundation of galactic civilization. This is going to cause a war, Alex said quietly. Yes, Kyrian agreed. But the alternative is eternal stagnation. The younger races will never reach their full potential as long as they depend on us for guidance. And you're sure this is what you want? Captain Morrison, we have been sure for longer than your species has existed. We simply needed someone, brave enough or foolish enough to help us do it. Jake smiled. Well, humans have never been accused of being too smart to take risks. The conference room of the Frontier Dawn had become the most important diplomatic location in the galaxy. Over the past 3 days, Jake Morrison and his crew had been working with Kyrian to plan something that had never been attempted before. The voluntary retirement of gods. The biggest challenge will be timing, said Dr. Nina Foster, the human psychologist who had been brought in via quantum communication to advise on the social implications. If we do this wrong, half the galaxy will collapse into chaos within weeks. Ambassador Ryan Clark had arrived on a fast courier ship to help manage the diplomatic crisis that was already brewing. Captain, we've got 17 different species, threatening military action if we don't release our guest to their religious authorities. Another 12 species are offering us alliance treaties if we can arrange private audiences with him. Kyrian listened to these reports with something that looked like ancient weariness. This is exactly why we maintained our silence for so long. The moment mortals begin to see gods as accessible, they lose all sense of proportion. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, Lisa Chen observed from her position at the science station. Fear-based respect isn't really respect at all. It's just fear. An interesting perspective, Kyrian replied. But fear-based systems are stable. What we are planning will create instability on a galactic scale. Jake was studying the plan they had developed on his tablet. It was ambitious and dangerous, but also surprisingly simple. Are all of your people willing to participate in this broadcast? The remaining 6 members of my species have agreed, Kyrian confirmed. We will appear together for the first time in recorded history and speak simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy. And you're absolutely certain you want to tell them the complete truth. Captain Morrison, we are tired of living lies. If we are to die soon anyway, we prefer to die as ourselves rather than as the myths others have created around us. Commander Alex Rivera looked up from the tactical display he had been studying. Sir, I have to advise you that our military analysts predict massive civil unrest on at least 40% of inhabited worlds when this broadcast happens. Some governments will fall within days. Some governments should fall, said a new voice from the communication console. It was Veldrin, a young alien from the Keth species who had become the first non-human to openly question the divine authority of the Silent Ones. My people have been ruled by priests who claim to speak for gods who never actually spoke to them. Maybe it's time we learn to think for ourselves. Kyrian turned toward the console with interest. You speak with remarkable courage for one so young. Are there others of your species who share your views? More every day, Veldrin replied. Your conversation with the humans has been leaked through underground channels. Many of us are starting to ask questions we were never allowed to ask before. Dr. Foster reviewed her psychological profiles on her screen. We're already seeing the formation of 3 distinct groups across the galaxy. The faithful who refuse to accept any change, the liberated who welcome the truth, and a large middle group that's still deciding what to believe. The middle group will be crucial, Ambassador Clark noted. If we can convince them to accept the transition gradually, we might avoid the worst-case scenarios. Lisa had been working on the technical aspects of the broadcast. I've been analyzing the Silent One communication networks. They have quantum transmission capabilities that can reach every inhabited system simultaneously. The message will be received everywhere at exactly the same moment. No chance for governments to suppress it or prepare their populations, Jake observed. Exactly. It will be impossible to contain or control. Kirian stood and moved to the viewing window that looked out into space. I have spent the last several 100,000 years watching younger races struggle with problems they could easily solve if they stopped looking to us for answers. Perhaps it is time they learned to trust themselves. What about the species that are completely dependent on your guidance? Alex asked. Some of them haven't made a major decision without consulting their priests in thousands of years. They will struggle, Kirian admitted. But they will also grow. Dependence creates weakness. Independence creates strength. The communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Thompson appeared on the screen looking more stressed than Jake had ever seen her. Captain, the situation is escalating rapidly. The Galactic Faithful Council has declared a holy war against humanity. They're calling for complete economic and military isolation of all human colonies until we surrender our guests to proper religious authorities. How are our colonies responding? Jake asked. About what you'd expect from humans. Most of them are telling the council exactly where they can put their holy war. Colonial Governor Stevens on New Boston sent a particularly colorful response that I can't repeat in mixed company. Kirian made a sound that might have been laughter. Your species continues to surprise me. Most races would be terrified by the threat of holy war. Humans don't respond well to threats, Jake replied. It tends to make us more stubborn, not more cooperative. Dr. Foster was monitoring news feeds from across the galaxy. Captain, I'm seeing some encouraging developments. Several progressive alien factions are openly supporting the human position. They're calling it the Liberation Movement. Liberation from what? Alex asked. Liberation from divine authority, she replied. They want the right to make their own decisions without checking with gods first. The door to the conference room opened and Professor Sam Williams entered carrying an armload of data tablets. I've been analyzing the historical patterns of religious transitions, he announced. Every major shift away from divine authority has been messy in the short term, but beneficial in the long term. Define messy, Ambassador Clark asked with concern. Wars, revolutions, social upheaval, economic disruption, and probably a few new forms of chaos we haven't seen before. And define beneficial. Increased technological development, expanded personal freedoms, more efficient governments, and generally happier populations once the transition period ends. Kirian returned to the table. How long do these transition periods typically last? Anywhere from 50 to 300 years, Williams replied. I will not live to see the end of this process, Kirian said quietly. None of my people will. We are asking you to help us start something we will never see completed. That's what progress usually looks like, Jake said. One generation plants, trees that the next generation gets to sit under. A wise perspective. Very well. When do we proceed with the broadcast? Lisa checked her technical preparations. The quantum transmission array is ready. All we need is your final approval. And we're sure about the message content? Ambassador Clark asked. Jake reviewed the script they had prepared. It was simple and direct, just like everything else about their contact with Kirian. The Silent Ones would identify themselves as ancient aliens rather than gods, explain that they had allowed the misunderstanding to continue for their own convenience, announce their intention to withdraw from galactic affairs, and encourage all species to take responsibility for their own futures. It's going to change everything, Alex said. Everything needs to change. Veldrin's voice came from the communication console. My generation has grown up knowing that we're not allowed to make important decisions for ourselves. Maybe the next generation will be braver. Kirian activated his own communication device. My fellow Silent Ones, are you prepared for our final act as gods? 5 other ancient voices responded from locations across the galaxy. We are ready, Kirian. Let us speak the truth at last. Jake looked around the room at his crew and their alien allies. Then let's do this. Open the channel to the entire galaxy. Lisa activated the quantum transmission array. Channel open, Captain. Every inhabited world in the galaxy is receiving our signal. Kyrian, whenever you're ready. The ancient being straightened in his chair and looked directly into the camera that would carry his image to billions of watching aliens. People of the galaxy, he began, his voice carrying the weight of millions of years. We are the ones you call the silent ones. Today we break our silence to tell you the truth about what we really are. Jake watched the transmission counter on Lisa's console. The message was being received on over 14,000 inhabited worlds simultaneously. In the next few minutes, the galaxy would learn that their gods were just very old aliens who had grown tired of pretending to be divine. The age of divine rule was about to end, and the age of galactic independence was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the Great Revelation broadcast, and the galaxy was still reeling from the aftershocks. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Harmony, watching as yet another former temple world transformed itself into a center of learning and research. The bridge was different from his old ship in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Human technology now incorporated design elements shared freely by Kyrian and the other former Silent Ones. The result was ships that were faster, more efficient, and more comfortable than anything humanity had built before. Captain, we're receiving a communication from the New Keth Council, reported Lieutenant Karen Walsh, the ship's new communications officer. They want to thank us again for helping them establish their first democratic government. Jake smiled. The Keth had been one of the first species to embrace liberation from divine authority. Young Veldrin had become their first elected leader, running on a platform of rational thinking and scientific advancement. Send them our congratulations on their successful first year of self-governance, Jake replied. Commander Alex Rivera looked up from his tactical station. Sir, we're also getting reports from the border regions. 3 more faithful holdout worlds have requested membership in the Free Worlds Coalition. The Free Worlds Coalition had formed naturally in the wake of the revelation. It started with progressive alien species who welcomed the truth about the Silent Ones, grew to include most human colonies, and now represented over 60% of inhabited systems in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Chen, now promoted to Chief Science Officer, was monitoring long-range sensors from her expanded science station. The faithful territories are continuing to isolate themselves, she reported. They've cut off almost all communication with the outside galaxy. Let them, said Professor Sam Williams, who had accepted a permanent position as the ship's cultural advisor. History shows that isolated societies eventually reconnect with the broader universe when their internal problems become too severe to ignore. The most dramatic changes had happened on the core worlds where religious authority had been strongest. Some governments had collapsed within days of the broadcast, leading to chaos and civil war, but other worlds had transitioned peacefully to new forms of leadership based on elected representation rather than divine appointment. Captain, came a familiar voice from the communication console. It was Kyrian, who had taken up residence in a small research facility on the human colony of New Geneva. I wanted to inform you that we have received word from the Xelon system. They have successfully launched their first independent deep space exploration mission. Jake felt a surge of pride. The Xelon had been completely dependent on religious guidance for over 4,000 years. 6 months ago, they wouldn't make any decision more complex than crop rotation without consulting their priests. Now, they were exploring unknown regions of space on their own initiative. That's excellent news, Jake replied. How are you feeling about all these changes? I am experiencing something I had not felt in millennia, Kyrian said, and Jake could hear satisfaction in the ancient alien's voice. I am proud of what these younger races are accomplishing now that they have stopped looking to us for answers. Dr. Ben Parker joined the conversation from the medical bay where he had been working with Kyrian's people to understand their failing life support systems. Kyrian, I have an update on the longevity treatments we discussed. We may be able to extend your remaining lifespan by several decades if you're interested. Thank you, Doctor, but no. We have accomplished what we set out to do. The galaxy is learning to function without us. It is time for us to rest. Jake understood. The former Silent Ones had stayed alive far longer than they wanted to, driven by a sense of responsibility to the species that worshipped them. Now that those species were learning independence, the ancient beings could finally allow themselves to die with dignity. "Captain," Lieutenant Walsh reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Thompson." Admiral Kate Thompson appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Jake could see the bustling activity of the Coalition's new Joint Command Center, where humans worked alongside aliens from dozens of species. "Jake, I wanted to give you an update on our exploration initiatives," she said. "The Coalition Council has approved funding for 50 new deep space missions over the next 5 years. They want human crews to lead most of them, since we seem to be good at making peaceful contact with unknown species." "Any idea why that is?" Jake asked with amusement. "The Council's official report says it's because humans treat everyone like people instead of like potential threats or gods," Thompson replied. "Apparently that's unusual." Lisa laughed. "We keep forgetting that most species in the galaxy were raised to be afraid of anything they didn't understand. Humans just assume that anything we don't understand can probably be figured out if we ask enough questions." The communication console chimed with another incoming message. This one was from Captain Maria Gonzalez, who had been leading diplomatic efforts to integrate former faithful worlds into the Coalition. "Jake, you need to see this," she said, her face showing barely contained excitement. "We just received a message from the Andrex hegemony. They want to abandon their theocratic government and join the Coalition." Alex whistled softly. The Andrex were among the most fanatical faithful species. If they're ready to abandon divine rule, the transition is happening faster than anyone predicted. "What changed their minds?" Jake asked. "They've been watching the progress of liberated worlds and comparing it to their own stagnation," Maria replied. "Their younger generation is demanding the right to pursue scientific careers instead of just religious ones. The older generation is realizing they can't stop the change forever." Professor Williams was taking notes on everything. "I'm documenting this transition for the historical record. Future generations will want to understand how galactic civilization transformed itself in less than a year." "What are you calling this period in your histories?" Jake asked. "The Great Awakening," Williams replied. "The time when an entire galaxy woke up from a dream of divine dependence and chose to think for itself." The ship's sensors detected movement in nearby space. A sleek vessel of unfamiliar design was approaching under peaceful intent flags. "Unknown ship, please identify yourself," Lieutenant Walsh transmitted. "This is Captain Zethara of the exploration vessel New Dawn," came the reply, in perfect English. "We are from the recently liberated world of Calamore. We heard that humans are good at teaching others how to explore safely. We would like to learn from you." Jake exchanged looks with his crew. This had been happening more and more frequently. Former faithful species were seeking out human ships to learn exploration techniques, scientific methods, and diplomatic protocols. "Welcome, Captain Zethara," Jake transmitted back. "We'd be honored to share what we know about exploration." As the alien ship docked with the Harmony, Jake reflected on how much everything had changed. A year ago, most alien species wouldn't have dared to approach human vessels without formal diplomatic protocols. Now they were actively seeking human guidance on how to become independent explorers themselves. "Captain," Kirian's voice came through the communication system one last time that day. "I wanted you to know that my people have made our decision. We will be shutting down our life support systems next week." Jake felt a mixture of sadness and respect. "Are you at peace with this choice?" "More than at peace," Kirian replied. "For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, we are eager to see what comes next. We have watched this galaxy grow from primitive settlements to a thriving civilization. Now we have seen it take the final step toward true independence. Our work here is finished." "Thank you," Jake said simply. "Thank you for trusting us to help you. Thank you for showing us that gods were never necessary. The younger races are far more capable than they ever realized. They just needed someone to believe in them." That evening, Jake stood in his quarters looking out at the stars. The galaxy looked the same as it always had, but he knew it was fundamentally different now. Billions of beings who had spent their entire lives looking upward for guidance were now looking forward toward their own futures. His door chimed and Lisa entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thinking deep thoughts, she asked as she handed him a cup. Just thinking about how we accidentally started a galactic revolution by being polite to a stranger. Not polite, Lisa corrected. We were just curious. We wanted to talk to something, new and interesting, and that was enough to change everything. Maybe that's the real difference between humans and other species, Lisa said thoughtfully. When we meet something we don't understand, our first instinct is to start a conversation. Everyone else either runs away or falls down worshipping. Jake sipped his coffee and watched as the new Dawn undocked from their ship, ready to begin its first independent exploration mission. In the distance, he could see the lights of other ships from dozens of species, all heading out into the unknown, with newfound confidence. You know what I think the best part of all this is? He said finally. What's that? 6 months ago, the galaxy was full of species who thought they needed gods to tell them what to do.